One of the ways we make sense of a Russian sentence is by looking at the case endings to know who's doing what, where, for who, and so on. And that goes for names too. First names and patronymics take endings just like nouns. For example, Митя читал Соне стихотворение Анны Ахматовой. Мария Борисовна читала Олегу Николаевичу стихотворение Пушкина. So here we see typical noun endings on all the first names and patronymics. Mitya, Maria Borisovna in the nominative, and Sonya and Olegu Nikolaevичу in the dative. But what about the last names, the familii? Pushkina looks like a normal genitive noun ending, but Akhmatovai, that looks like an adjective ending. And that's our clue that certain common Russian last names, familii, need some special attention. So let's look at familii, Russian last names, and how they change. There are different types of last names in Russian, and some of them behave differently. So in this video, we'll just look at familii with these very common endings, ov or yov or yev, and in or in. You probably already know that last names reflect gender, masculine or feminine, and number, singular or plural. In this video, we'll take these one by one, and you'll see why in a minute. We'll start with the masculine forms. There's going to be something a little odd here. One ending is not like the others. Вот Morozov. Я знаю Morozova. Вот дом Morozova. Я говорил о Morozovе. Я позвонил Morozovу. Я говорил с Morozovым. Can you see which one is different? Here's a hint. If you've been learning Russian for a while, you know that nouns take noun endings and adjectives take adjective endings. But what's going on here? All these forms have noun endings, just like the first names and patronymics. But this last one, the instrumental, has an adjective ending. That is kind of strange, so you'll want to take care to remember this one. Try practicing out loud, thinking of which famous Russians you might like to have a conversation with. С Пушкиным, с Гагариным, с Акуниным, с Горбачевым, с Прокофьевым, or с Гребенщиковым. Now let's look at the plural forms for when you may be talking about a family or a couple. Вот Morozovы. Я знаю Morozovых. Вот дом Morozovых. Я говорил о Morozovых. Я позвонил Morozovым. Я говорил с Morozovыми. Now, what do you notice about these? Pause the video and see if you can pick out the one that's different from the rest. Got it? These are all adjective endings, except for the nominative plural, which looks like a plural noun. And that's why the title of Dostoevsky's last novel looks like this, Братья Карамазовы. Again, this rule seems kind of random, so be sure to practice them aloud in the context of a sentence so you can start to develop a sense of what just sounds right. Now, we still haven't talked about the feminine forms. At this point, I would understand if you want to just hold your head in your hands and say oi, 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 not more endings. And if you do say that, well, actually, you'll already have most of the forms you need for the feminine last names. That's because these four endings all look like the feminine adjective ending, oi. Вот дом Анны Morozovой. Я говорил об Анне Morozovой. Я позвонил Анне Morozovой. Я говорил с Анной Morozovой. And it's just the nominative and accusative that have noun endings. Вот Анна Morozova. Я знаю Анну Morozovу. And again, practice is the key to getting used to this system. Think of famous Russians like Natasha Rostova or Anna Akhmatova and practice saying that you know them, you're thinking about them, you've danced with them maybe, and so on. And one last note. There are different ways of arranging Russian cases in a chart, and you might have noticed that the order I've used here is a little unusual, and that's just because it's easier to group similar endings together if we have nominative, accusative, genitive, prepositional, dative, and instrumental in this order. That is kind of abstract, so if you want a reminder of this order, you might just think of a silly sentence like, nearly all giraffes prefer Danish ice cream. And that also explains the giraffe at the beginning of this video, just in case you were wondering. In the long run, though, practice in speaking and writing is the best way to come to the point where you can forget the rules because you just know what sounds right. Try talking with Russian friends or other students about who you'd like to meet or who you enjoy reading. Just make sure you're talking about last names with these endings in ov, yov, yev, or in, because other last names don't have exactly this pattern. We'll cover those in another video. Summing up, Russian last names with these common endings have a mix of noun and adjective endings. Masculine forms have noun endings, except for the instrumental, which has an adjective ending. Plural forms have adjective endings, except for the nominative, which has a noun ending. Feminine last names have noun endings for the nominative and accusative, and then just remember oi, adjective endings for the other cases. And keep in mind that other types of familii, like Yevtushenko, Shostakovich, Gogol, Dostoevsky, Tolstoy, are not part of this system.